we got an interview, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Christine, and I'm the author of the Being Matt Murdock, One Fan's Journey into the Science of Daredevil book. And this is Capes and Lunatics.
Yay! So this is the Devil You Know, part of the Capes and Lunatics podcast network. I am so excited. I have been like head deep in your book for like the last week and a half, and I've been enjoying it. But
I'm glad to hear that.
Started. Phil really sends his regards. He's sorry he couldn't make it. Late stage capitalism. He had to work. So before we dig into the book, could you tell our audience a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I born and raised in Sweden, still live in Sweden. I got into Daredevil back in actually a couple of years after the movie came out, which I watched on I don't think it was VHS. I think it was actually DVD, but it was like way back in, in the olden days. And I didn't actually love the movie, but I liked it okay on a rewatch and thought, what an interesting character. Cause I'd been reading comics as a kid and stuff. I'd been reading like a lot of, Spider-Man, Superman, that kind of thing. And, so I started kind of just researching the character. And then I think around 2006 or so, I just dove in. I think I read pretty much everything there was to read in like 3 months or something. And then in late 2007, I set up my website, which is, the Other Murdock Papers. And, it's a blog that's still I still write for it occasionally, but not as much as I used to. But pretty early on, I got into the habit of, I have a life science background. And I've always been interested in kind of, neuroscience and also like in general, what happens when you lose a sense and that kind of thing. I even wrote a paper on that back in college, sensory compensation. So yeah, so I had like the combination of being interested in superheroes and being interested in this kind of very niche area of neuroscience. And so, it just ended up being one of those things I wanted to explore more, and also how it kind of interacts with his blindness and all of that. So I started writing about that like more and more. And I was a bit worried that people were going to be like, oh, this is boring. What is this? But a lot of those
that those posts are like still like some of your number one posts.
Yeah, they are. People loved it. Or at least some people did. Not everything's for everybody, but a lot of people really enjoyed that. So I kept doing it. And then it kind of became this thing in the back of my mind that, one of these days I'm going to write a book about this. And, that was, I think, about 10 years before I actually got it, done. But for many, many years, I would just kind of, if I came across anything interesting, I would kind of, research wise, I would make a note of it. And, some of the stuff I started, some chapters I started working on like maybe 8 or 10 years ago, filed away for later and that kind of thing. And then it kind of got to the point where I was like, you know what? If I were to be told that I had like a year left to live, which I'm not dying, so there's nothing like that. But it just, I was kind of at that stage in my life where I was just thinking, this is the kind of thing I would really want to do. If I had a limited time left on earth, this book it needs to get out there. So then I kind of set aside, I was able to cut back on work a bit, and I spent like a little over a year just finishing everything, and really applying myself and getting it done. So it came out in July of 2022.
Wow. A year. We'll get into that later. I didn't hear you mention saved Daredevil. So can we get into that a little bit? It started off, in the fan.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
You're a part of it.
Right. I am also a member of the saved Daredevil team. We used to be Save Daredevil without, now we have very conveniently a double D in the middle. So it's saved. So yeah, I was a part of the sort of initial gang that got together right after, actually a few days before the cancellation, because we were kind of worried because both Iron Fist and Luke Cage, I think at that point had been canceled. And we were like, oh gosh, shit. And we didn't know each other much. Like there was a couple of us that kind of knew of each other, just mostly from, being online in the same circles. And, we kind of just got together. It was like, on Twitter in a DM group, And we started just kind of, setting up this campaign to push for a continuation of the show. And then like a few days later, it was canceled. And then we had to, of course, regroup. We've been doing that since 2018, which is kind of crazy. And of course, now we've shifted from, a Save Our Show campaign to just being kind of a hype train at this point. So,
everybody should be on the hype train for Charlie Cox, quite honestly.
Yeah. So there's a lot of, there's so much to be hyped about right now. It's kind of funny. We have this, podcast that comes out every now and then. I mean, we're up to like episode 47, so we've been doing okay, but called Talk Daredevil, if anyone wants to check that out. And the most recent episode we did, we had to, from like a couple of weeks ago, we recorded it, and there were like so many things happening that while I was editing it, like so much had happened that we had to like go back in, record a new ending and like stick it to the end. So it's been pretty crazy. We're all just, we're geeking out hard.
It's so funny because with Daredevil, you're either, as a Daredevil fan, you're either in feast or famine mode. And we had been in famine mode for so long. Now we're in feast mode, like, especially in the comics. And, like, everybody's, like, waiting for Born Again. And then Echo also just came out and all these things. And it's just, like, it's, like, as somebody who's been reading comics, like, my whole life and, like, Daredevil since, like, the late 90s. And, like, seeing how he was treated then to compare to, like, how he's grown as a character in the mainstream now, it's so amazing. It really is.
I mean, I had never, when I came across the movie, I had never heard of the character. Like, he did have, there were like a couple of arcs from the Miller run that were translated into Swedish. So he did have, I guess, a minor following back, like in the 80s when those were coming out. But he was not a known character, like, here at all. I mean, he's a relatively minor character compared to some others in the US too. But I mean, especially in this part of the world, I had never heard of this character.
It's good to know Frank Miller is inescapable everywhere.
Yeah. No, but I mean, because that was like when, the whole Elektra saga and everything, I think that was such a huge hit that, that got, pretty widely translated.
Very cool. So do you remember your actual first Daredevil comic that you read?
Yeah, let's see. Gosh, I want to say, I'm trying to remember because I was like doing it very out of order in a way. Because I jumped on to the comics that were coming out at the time. Okay. So I think it may have actually been, this was like early Brubaker, oh my gosh, who was your artist? Michael Lark. Sorry, I always say Brubaker Lark. And I'm like, something like that. Oh, yeah, that slipped my mind. But yeah, I think I may have actually read their first, like the first collection, trade paperback collection that they wrote first. I think that may have been it. And then I was kind of at the same time finding like the older comics. But I can't quite remember, which is, that's interesting. But it was like I was doing that and then I was going back to the very beginning at the same time. So I kind of had like two.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. And
so I found Daredevil through Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, technically.
Like, I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, I was at a con and they were talking about it and I was just like, what? And so ever since I heard that like interview at a con, it's been my life's mission to make that canon. Yeah. But so like, I was reading your Reddit AMA. Shout out to you doing a Reddit AMA, by the way. Like,
it was
Reddit
fun.
is very, very scary sometimes because you just never know what you're going to get. And somebody did give you that question. They were like, hey, did you talk about the Teenage Ninja Turtles? And you're like, no. But like, I read the extra chapter that she had published too. And I thought that was very interesting as well.
Yeah.
I totally get why it didn't make the final cut, but maybe one day we will get a second edition.
Maybe so. Honestly, the reason I cut that was because it was taking me, it was just slightly off topic. Like, I mean, I put it on the companion website for a reason because I do think, I mean, it's interesting stuff. And I put a lot of work into it, but I guess writing a book is all about like killing your darlings.
Yes.
And
that, afraid to kill your darling.
Yeah. But in that case, I felt like, because I was going to put that pretty early in the book and I was like, no, I don't want to put it off any longer really getting into the stuff with the senses and everything. So although, I know the book, I was kind of worried about that too. The same way I was worried about like writing about, the science of the senses on my blog. Because I've tried to make it as pedagogical as possible, but I also don't want to talk down to the readers. So some parts of it, and I tell people this who want to read the book that, number one, you can jump around in the book. Like some chapters are just going to be lighter reading than others. Some are going to be like, oh, whoa, okay. But it's like, okay, you don't have to actually understand everything. That's fine. If there's one chapter that doesn't speak to you, skip to the next chapter. That is fine. Because I do get into the nitty gritty of the science, in some places where I kind of worry about, okay, I'm going to probably lose some people here. But still, I wanted to just kind of take people along for like the kind of journey I made in my head to like figure this stuff out. So it's like, let's think through this together. It was kind of how I approached it. But some of it is, and the thing is too, like with this book, I'm a huge fan of the nonfiction science genre in general. Like I'm the kind of person who likes reading a bunch of books about neuroscience. I mean, for a lay audience usually, but I've read some textbooks on that kind of stuff too. But I enjoy that genre. I enjoy, the history of science. I enjoy all kinds of stuff. So I was thinking there should be some kind of audience with an overlap where like they also enjoy that kind of fare and they also enjoy Daredevil at the same time. And, some people are going to be.
You coined the term though, fan nonfiction. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a really interesting way to look at it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah.
So you mentioned the movie. So I actually really love the Ben Affleck Daredevil movie. And it's not for like comic book accuracy or like scientific accuracy of like a person losing senses, but they try, because at the heart of it, Daredevil is a street level character and he does have a disability at the same time. So sure, super ability, but disability. I think they did try to, in a very early 2000s kind of way, to address that. And I think that's what I appreciated so much, because much like you, I get very frustrated when it kind of feels like some people forget that he is blind. Like they kind of look at his super abilities a little too much. And I think that's like kind of a disservice to maybe like maybe a blind person has heard, oh, hey, there's a blind superhero character, but like not great representation a lot of the time.
Yeah. And I think I've been talking to people a lot about this, and also for people who want to, read the book. If you want to get into that, that's, a lot of that stuff is in the final chapter of the book, about the missing sense. And I think, one problem is that people have this idea of you're either fully sighted or you're completely blind. And I think and that kind of thing trips people up, I think, in their thinking, process. And I think there's also, even in terms of like the show and stuff, sometimes how they talk about it sometimes feels like people involved with the show, I'm not going to name names, are kind of hesitant to actually call him blind, full stop, because I think there's like this fear that, oh, it's just going to, offend blind people or whatever. I've had several, actually like a handful of, blind people get back to me who have either read the book or in many cases, both my, blog and the book. Well, not all of my blog, because it's too much to read. It's insane. The amount of stuff on there is that's like years of my life right there. But anyway, I've had blind and visually impaired people get back to me saying that they came to appreciate the character more from my perspective, which I was, I'm happy to hear that. But I think I do think that a lot of writers, do have a problem with, and this is just, they do have a problem with combining the fact that, yes, there are certain things that he can do better than anyone, whether blind or sighted. Absolutely. He does exist in a universe of superhumans. So there's that, but it's also like, there's this, I call it kind of like the lie at the origin of Daredevil, the idea that his other senses compensate.
But there's the whole thing.
Yeah, there's a logical flaw in that it seems like a lot of just creators don't really quite know what to do with, because on the one hand, like I put it, in some cases, his other senses compensate fully. In other cases, they don't even compensate like at all. You know, like put Matt Murdock in a college classroom and he is like any other blind student. There's like really no difference. I think I wrote somewhere there, it's like, okay, so you can tell what the professor had for lunch, but that doesn't actually help you do your schoolwork. So, and I think this whole, like, there's a patchwork of different things going on. And I think in a lot of ways, the way a lot of writers have dealt with this is to just simply not deal with it. Like, you just avoid putting him in situations where this would create a problem. And that creates a kind of bias in the stories where you just like, you don't get to go grocery shopping with Matt Murdock. And I mean, part of that is because like that's not central to a comic book about a superhero. But it also kind of tends to. It could be.
I mean, because he is street level. I feel like street level characters are more inclined to have that day in the life of the civilian identity.
Right.
And I think my favorite writers are the ones that kind of do that, which kind of like Manchester does do that. A couple others do that. And those are the runs that I really enjoy. Yeah. Don't forget Matt.
Oh, I agree. I always want a lot of Matt Murdock in my stories. But one thing I'd actually be interested in doing one of these days is to make a comparison between, like, really as an experiment, just read a bunch of Daredevil comics from one era and like compare it to maybe Spider-Man from the same era or some other more street level character, and just look at what kind of situations they put that character into that you never see Matt in, because if you put him into that situation, his blindness is going to be more apparent. And I think in order to get the sort of central concept of sensory compensation to work, you need to kind of you need to avoid certain things in order to sell that to the audience. And I don't know how much of this is like, honestly, I think very little of it is deliberate. I think it is just, especially when you have a character that one creative team inherits from the previous creative team who inherited from their creative team. And then you get this whole lore around a character that people just kind of have come to see this character in a particular way. And you don't want to maybe change things up too much, because then that's going to be like too glaring or something. So I think it's just kind of become this sort of truism that, like, well, his other senses more than compensate. And then people just stop. They don't think beyond that or question that. And that's always like annoyed the heck out of me. So a lot of my old posts are like I always, preface it with like, okay, I'm back beating that old horse again. But like, yes, he really is blind, in ways that actually sometimes matter, and in ways that would, if he were a real person, affect him several times a day in various ways. And so the whole idea that he, I think there's even an old comic from like the early 70s where he's like, oh, I forgot I was blind. And I'm like, well, I know, I don't think he would think about it very much, but I don't think he'd forget. No. So I do find that kind of interesting, too. But again, I've tried to just have a very sort of scientific approach to like, okay, does this make sense? And kind of just interrogate, the stories and, what happens on the page and how he's talked about and how he's understood and by his readers and creators. So
I do want to give a shout out to you for making me feel a little less crazy. It always bothers me that they never focus on the sense of smell, because the sense of smell is tied to memory, right? And Matt has all these traumas, like with his mom leaving and his dad dying and like growing up in a gym and like how things should trigger him since, his smell is in overdrive and things like that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And, and one reason I give for that in the book is that humans in general tend to. Yeah. It's like, and that's one of the, I think, it's interesting about the sense of smell being tied to memory, because that seems to be kind of the extent to which the sense of smell is special in that way compared to the other senses is kind of debated. Where some say that, well, maybe there's some indication that those sensations are more kind of emotional or like, that they had like an emotional component that maybe the other senses don't. But there's also one explanation that I find kind of compelling, which is that when we do come across a scent that reminds us of something or like transports us back to some memory, one of the things that sticks out is that it's surprising to us because we don't remember having a memory of this smell in the first place. So it's like, how do you like suddenly you're, thrown back to some other event that you don't even remember having associated with any kind of smell at all. And that is surprising to you. And then that of course triggers something like, whoa, what just happened there? But yeah. And I mean, one reason given for why we don't pay attention to smell as much is that yes, humans do have a slightly worse sense of smell than say I have my cat Murdock here next to me. There he is. And he has a sister. He has a sister named Electra. She'll probably going to show up soon too. But I mean, yes, they do have a better sense of smell than I do. Smell is more important to them than it is to me. There's also some people have pointed out that to some animals like cats and dogs and others, smells we tend to kind of classify scents into either like yuck or like, ooh, that smells really good. We don't have a lot of smells that we're just kind of neutral to, like emotionally. We tend to either just like them or dislike them. Whereas some animals, apparently seem to have they find smells probably useful in ways that we don't. But one reason that we don't notice smells as much is because they don't update. Like if you see or hear something suddenly, it's like it's like the frame rate for processing that sensation is much, much quicker. Whereas smells can kind of sneak up on you in a different way and you don't notice them change as much. And that, like, I kind of forgot much of my reasoning behind that, but it's in the book.
Yeah, it's in the book.
About how there's, some scientists have suggested that it's a kind of like a change blindness, but for smell, where it's like we don't, it happens at such a slow rate that we just kind of don't notice it as much. And we don't notice it at even like at quantities that if someone were to like hold up for something for you to smell and ask you like, can you smell this? You'd be like, oh yeah. If you're paying attention to it, but if you're not paying attention to it, you probably wouldn't even notice. Yeah.
But it's weird too because smell helps you taste too. It's like how like smell is tied to so many things, but like it's so overlooked.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, and that's actually another theory is that that humans have that our smell or our sense of smell is actually more adapted to helping us with taste. Like we have, because there are two different pathways that, you have access to the nose. One is like breathing in this way, and the other is like when you're chewing food, it comes up the other way. And we actually have a better opening there than a lot of other animals do. So we actually do get more, some people suggest, pleasure out of our food while chewing than a lot of other animals do because our sense of smell seems to be optimized for that route. And I mean, that makes total sense to me. I mean, if there's one like human universal, it's like, I don't know, a single culture on the planet that doesn't have spices, herbs, cooking techniques, have a lot of, celebration around food. And I think that's a very kind of human thing to enjoy and to savor food.
Yeah, definitely. I did see on your website that you read Black Armor #1. Have you had a chance to catch up on 2 and 3 yet?
No, I haven't. And that's the only reason I haven't. Like, I just got super busy and I'm like, okay, I'm just going to read them all when they're all out and then just do one review. I don't even know how, like, back in the day, I used to be able to post so much. Of course, that part of that was like, I had, recently fallen in love with the character and, that kind of thing. So I think that was the motivation for a couple of years there where I was writing a lot, but now it's just been super busy with other things. But I'm definitely, I enjoyed the first issue. I haven't read, the other issues, but I very much intend to. So.
What is it like collecting comic books overseas? Like I'm an American, so I'm lucky. Like I go to the shop on Tuesday for DC, Wednesday for everything else, and like I've just even growing up just grabbing it off the newsstand. I know that it's kind of not like that over there, but is it? Do you guys have like a local comic book shops? Like how far do you have to drive for?
I do. There's one. There's one downtown in Old Town, Stockholm, that I go to. I've been going there for a few years. The way it works there, like they do have a lot of the best-selling comics they order and have like
they use it through mostly Diamond though, right? The Diamond distribution system, I think.
Yeah. And I think they get their comics from like many of the same places that like an American comic book shop would. But you have to have a pull list for many of the titles. So I used to
weird import taxes like everywhere else. I don't know what it is about comic books, but like across a lot of different countries, there's these weird import taxes for like comic books or just books, paper goods in general.
I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know. I think, I mean, they're a little bit pricier than they would be in the US, but not by like a huge margin. So yeah, I mean, if you know where to go, there are, comic book stores where you can go and, and get yourself like a pull list for the titles you want. And that's going to be pretty much the same, I guess, as in the US. And then, of course, I mean, Black Armor, I was getting the digital version off of Amazon, which I was actually kind of surprised because I've been a Marvel Unlimited subscriber since forever. And I'm like, what? I can't buy it on Marvel Unlimited anymore. And then someone, told me about, how it's been switched over to Kindle now. So,
yeah.
Yeah,
that's been a hard transition for me. I missed the standalone Comixology app and all that stuff and how
Comixology. I don't think that ever, like, there was a problem for people overseas getting access to that in the first place. Like, I don't remember all of that, but it's mostly been, I haven't actually been reading a lot of the ongoing Daredevil comic for the last couple of years. Part of it's been, first I was busy with the book and everything, and I would just kind of put all that aside because I had to kind of, when I was thinking of like which comics to look at for the book, I had to kind of set an end date at some point where it's like, okay, this is what's going to be included in what I'm looking at. So most of it is going to be, volumes 1, 2, and 3. And, but I've been meaning to, I have a lot of catching up to do.
It's a good time to just jump right into, Sal Amadine's, run. He really is like a Matt Murdock fan. Not necessarily, like he is like into like doing the introspectives of Matt's mind and stuff right now and like really getting back to basics and hopefully not torturing him because the last two runs have been all about torturing poor Matt and like, I'm over it.
Yeah. See, I think maybe that's part of why the thing is, one thing I realized when I was researching, the book was I really got this like newfound appreciation for a lot of the, comics from the 70s, like even like the pre-Miller 70s, that a lot of them are, I mean, okay, they're a little bit, it's the 70s. They're kind of out there. And a lot of the stories are just like, well, it's the 70s. But I think one thing I really appreciate is that they actually do take they're pretty serious in how they approach the character in a lot of ways. And I think that for a few years there was really a nice balance between Matt's personal life and all of these challenges that he was up against. But one thing that was kind of nice about that was that it didn't all have to center on his like personal life. Because I think one thing that's kind of been overdone is like, when you ruin Matt Murdock's life for like the 5th time, it's starting to feel like it's been overdone to some extent. And I think with a character like this, who number one cares a lot about like the people in his neighborhood, but he also, of course, beats himself up about, everyone he couldn't save and all of that. So it's not as if everything has to center, like his own life doesn't have to be the stage for everything in order to, kind of, challenge him and put him through the ringer and all that. You can easily just have him be just utterly befuddled by some, nefarious character doing something. And that doesn't have to be like about ruining his life, his personal life. It could be something else. And I think, that's something I would really like to just tell a lot of the modern writers that, there is that venue too. Like you can mess with him without messing with him, if you know what I mean.
Exactly. Yeah. And Sal's totally kind of got mad. I think he was kind of tired of people beating up on poor Matt too. So he's like, he's kind of made him a priest. So, and we haven't really touched the religious angle in a really long time with Matt too. So,
but that, see, to me, the religious angle is kind of like this is maybe controversial, but Matt just, like, he's never really been a practicing Catholic until very recently. I'm going to say, like
most Catholics.
No, but seriously, because like when you read all the comics, like several times, I think, it was just always kind of assumed, I guess, that he was Irish Catholic because he's Irish or like of Irish descent. But I think it was like Tony Isabella who, like in the late 60s, had the first comic that actually had like a Catholic theme, where I think it's Matt kind of visiting. I think it has something to do with like a priest from his old church or something. Like it actually brings that into the comic in a way. And then they don't really touch it much. And then of course you have Daredevil Born Again, which has a lot of sort of like the imagery, the mythology, the sort of, all of that is very sort of religious, but there's actually very little of Matt practicing Catholicism for like the first 40 years of the comic. And then that kind of,
well, it's kind of taboo too, as well, at least in the U.S., for a long time being Catholic instead of being Protestant. So I think that had a lot to do with it.
Maybe, yeah. Yeah, it just seems like I don't mind it, but I do notice that it was I think Kevin Smith really dialed that up like to a 10. And then that was touched on in the movie. And then of course the show went pretty far in that direction. And then it feels like the comic is kind of taking after the show in that respect. So it's like, it's something. Yeah. No, I mean, so it's something that's there. I don't necessarily mind it. And I realize it's probably, could be something that's really important to a lot of people, but I do see it as something that didn't really, like, it wasn't, featured very much in the comic. Yeah.
I mean, unless you're Catholic, there's like a lot of nuances and intricacies. So unless you're like actually Catholic, I feel like a lot of people didn't like really want to touch it. But I thought that was just like kind of an interesting touch to really flesh Matt out. And then we get his mother left his father and became a nun.
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
The fact that Bloody Mary, and,
right,
the little things.
True. Absolutely. But but I mean, I see it as one of those things that, for some people that's very, very important to them and something they relate to. Whereas for me, like Matt's blindness is very important to me. It's not something I relate to. I have good vision, but it's something that I, feel is an important aspect of the character that maybe other people don't care about. So, I mean, I guess that's another good thing about Matt Murdock. Like everyone can find something they relate to or really, So.
Very cool. So let's see. Oh, since we kind of mentioned black armor, I kind of like the biomimetic armor of the 90s, because you got to remember in the 90s every superhero had armor, but like not a lot of street level characters actually had armor, and like Matt doesn't have a healing factor. So for me, I liked it, and he kind of went out of D.G. Chichester kind of went out of his way to explain it. Which made me feel a little better about it, and that's also why I like the Daredevil movie. Because they go, it's like biking leather. It's not spandex. You need more than spandex when you're fighting.
Yeah. So. I also kind of like the armored costume. It's very sleek looking. I mean, it's very, it's not like too bright or anything. It's quite, it's nice. And, but that's another thing that a lot of people, but even like just translating a character from the comic book page to like live action, I notice a lot of fans are like, it doesn't look exactly like it does in the comics. And I'm thinking, but if you did exactly what's in the comics for live action, it's not going to look good. It's like, you don't want like super, super thin spandex on like an actual person's body. It's not going to be like to anybody's benefit.
Cosplayers will tell you that.
No, there are a lot of really, really good cosplayers out there. Although I'm not sure cosplayers, it would be advised for them to actually go out fighting crime wearing those costumes. So.
Definitely not.
So, I mean, I think, but I don't know if people have, I'm not going to mention the spoilers or anything, but there's a lot of great footage out there for people to look at, from the, upcoming show that looked pretty
they're not
good.
really keeping a lid on this one.
No, we are so, like, me and the rest of the Save Daredevil team were like, did we get this many spoilers for like the first season? And
no, we didn't.
No, we did not.
And we got the hallway scene. They hyped the hallway scene, and that was about it.
Yeah. And I also think that back in that would have been 2014 that they were shooting it, but like back then, of course it was a much anticipated project. Absolutely. But people didn't really know what to expect. So I don't remember there being like the hype wasn't the same. Yeah. Whereas the hype now, especially with this being a character whose show was canceled, it's now back. It's part of the MCU. Like they added the timeline to like the Disney Plus timeline and everything. So there's so much excitement around it. And I think, I also think that, the whole thing they're doing with like the Spotlight banner that, Echo is under. We don't know if Daredevil is going to be part of the Spotlight banner line of shows, but I would assume so. Where they're doing,
it's going to be 18 episodes still, right? So I'm assuming they're really going all out for it. And they're gonna do
I keep hearing different things about like, oh, the 18 episodes are like two parts of season one, or is it a season 1 and a season 2? Like, who knows?
It's season 1A and 1B from everything that I can tell, which is cool.
Yeah,
like it gives it an old school network feel, which I think some of the streaming service, specifically Disney Plus, might need to really rev up that revenue.
But that's
the ad tier. So
yeah, and I think it's interesting how I feel like there's been a lot of just reevaluation of where Marvel Studios, where they were going with their TV offerings, and of course there's been some of that reported in the trade press too. Where it was pretty clear that their TV offerings were not working quite as well as they had hoped. They've also been like insanely expensive. I remember hearing that
streaming is it's a money pit, truly.
Yeah. But even like, I think when you compare, I don't remember the exact numbers, but like Daredevil was like 1/5 of what it costs to produce like WandaVision. And even with Echo now, they're actually still more expensive than Daredevil on a per episode basis, but much cheaper than what they had made previously. And at the same time, I think from what I'm hearing, Echo has been doing pretty well. In terms of views,
the format really works for her, is what I heard. Like,
and
she's kind of a new character. Like, she hasn't been proven. She's not really tied to much.
Mm-hmm.
So that binge format, and then also Daredevil in the front half, obviously really gave it that boost too. So I'm excited that people discovered Echo. She's a very special character. So
yeah, I really love that show much more than I thought I would. I thought I'd like it, but I really didn't know what to expect, and I really enjoyed it. So, so that was fun.
Okay,
and again, it's a street level kind of show, which I think bodes well for Daredevil, hopefully. So.
I love all the quotes that you use in the book, but chapter 2 is my favorite because when you can use a Neil Gaiman quote, please use a Neil Gaiman quote.
Yeah.
So how did you decide, how did you pull all these quotes? Were they just floating in your head and you just wrote them down and I'll find somewhere to put them?
Yeah, actually the Neil Gaiman quote, I admit right away I found on one of those quote pages, I want to quote about this, So that was a quote. I just kind of liked the quote. Some of the quotes, for the first chapter about the literary origins, that seemed like such a slam dunk to use the Valley of the Blind quote, especially because it mentions a lot of you'll notice something that was written decades before Daredevil came out, and it still has a lot of the same types of things that people are doing, hearing heartbeats and that kind of thing. So that one felt pretty obvious. I knew that I wanted a quote to start each chapter. That was just something I was very attached to. So, let's see. I actually have the book right next to me. I don't remember, all the quotes that I had. Some of they're very kind of different. Some are from the scientific.
I really enjoyed that.
Yeah. Some are from the scientific.
Neil Gaiman, and then some weird science guy I've never heard of.
Yeah, and then I have the one with one of the radar chapters is just foggy, Let's see, which one is this? Sorry, I got this up here. The one with Foggy. It's a conversation between Matt and Foggy from the comics, where Matt says, "I really am blind from a childhood accident that heightened my remaining senses and added a sort of radar sense. It gives me an idea of an object's contour, but that's all." And then Foggy says, "Let me get this straight. You only see things in outlines. You decided to put on a costume, run around rooftops, and fight supervillains." And then Matt goes, "I'm an endless contradiction that never stand up to cross-examination, Foggy. Always thought that was part of my charm." And that's from like late.
That sums it up.
Yeah. And because I loved that dialogue in the comics is from their first kind of real talk after Foggy finds out that he's Daredevil. And Matt then a few weeks later just decides to kind of show up at the office as if nothing had happened. Of course, Foggy's pissed, like, "You've been lying to me all these years." And of course he assumes that Matt's not really blind. And then he goes, "I really am blind." And then he explains how this works. And then of course that's in the comics that is superimposed on like an image, or like a panel showing Foggy in kind of an outline. So it really, I actually love those, both the Carl Kiesel and, what's the one after it? Yeah, that's Carl Kiesel. And then, okay, it's slipping my mind. Anyway, there were a couple of runs there, like in late volume 1 during the 90s that were actually, pretty funny. They had a lot of humor in them, without necessarily going overboard, because I enjoyed that kind of humor. It was a very sort of, self-deprecating, witty, stuff that I felt, I feel like Daredevil is a character who can work as both very dark but he can also do a kind of dry, self-deprecating sense of humor, really well.
Yeah, definitely.
So there was a lot of that, and there was a lot of just kind of like, okay, I don't make sense, but this is me. So my big quotes from the beginning of the chapters are from very, very different sources. And it was just like, depending on what I wanted to get across. But yeah. And of course the one from the final chapter, which is the one that I often use to remind people of Matt's blindness, is the one from, Miller and Klaus Janson from Daredevil 191, which is also my all-time favorite issue of the comic. Nice. Roulette, the one where he goes to a Bullseye's hospital bed and acts all menacing, where he says the secret identity can be a relief, Bullseye. When I'm Murdock, I don't have to use my amplified senses to pretend I'm not blind. And I think that's something that people might need to be reminded of every now and then, that it's really
part of the Bible in chapter 1 of Daredevil.
Yeah. So,
I actually didn't know what to expect with your book because, D.G. Chichester kind of recommended it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was called Being Matt Murdock. And I thought it was going to be one of those fandom psychology books just from the title of it. So I was just like, okay. But no, it really surprised me because I do like to kind of nitpick and thought experiments about if this character was real, how would that actually work? Actually really right up my alley. And he says, he's like, she rightfully called me out about the computers.
I know, and it was
good. It had to be done.
But it was so funny because I approached him about I did this with some of the writers and artists, especially some that I kind of knew from before. We don't really, I guess, know each other at all, but I mean, he had commented on my blog a couple of times, and he was someone I was following on social media, and I kind of just reached out to him and said that, hey, I wrote this book. Do you want a free copy? I'd be happy to send it to you, which I did. But it's like, I do give you a hard time about the computer screen. And he was really, really nice about getting back to me. On the plus side, I also really did enjoy his senses writing, which I also write in the book. So I guess it's kind of, it kind of evens out, I suppose, but he's been really, really supportive, and I really appreciate that. He have kind of
the same mind. He has files for things, and he really loves research, and I think that's why I really enjoyed his writing. He actually put a lot of thought and research into the stuff that he did specifically for Daredevil. Like, he didn't take it like lightheartedly. And
Yeah.
you know, he had lived in New York at the time, so he really got the essence of New York.
Yeah.
And things like that. 90s New York is its own whole bag of hammers. So it was very cool to read that. And, you know,
Yeah.
he's just like so hard on himself, but like he's just like, yeah, she called me out. And I love how you put it. It's like, yeah, how the mysterious appearance and disappearance of this
within the span of like 5 issues, or something like that. Yeah. So I mean, and I do try to, I don't know to what extent that comes across, but I do try to, even when I'm getting into like heavy science stuff, I do try to be kind of, you know, tongue in cheek about a lot of it and not take myself too seriously, because like, you know, and especially like I tell people in my normal life who aren't comic book fans at all, I'm like, yeah, my mom was like, I'm having trouble explaining to other people what your book is about. And I'm like, yeah, I can kind of see that.
It's okay. Chichester's mom's has a hard time explaining what his book is about. So it's just an author thing, honestly, a lot of times.
Yeah. And I was just like, I told my mom, like, I gave her a copy. I'm like, you'll just have to show them. So I can kind of see that. But I mean, I do have, you know, there's, on the one hand, I do take this very seriously. On the other hand, I can kind of joke about, you know, taking it seriously. And also, so I do put some kind of very lighthearted snark in there, from time to time, much of it directed at myself. So, you got to have a little fun with it, but
absolutely. Speaking of that, like all of that, is there, if somebody approached and said they wanted to do a second book similarly on a different character, what character would it be?
Ooh, that's a really tough question. And people have been asking me that, like, oh, which character are you gonna, what's next? And the problem, I think, for a lot of characters is that, I mean, Daredevil isn't the only one you could write this kind of book about. However, a lot of characters do kind of, have powers that are so off the charts that it's just like, I mean, like Kitty Pryde phasing through walls. It's like, nope. I mean, I suppose okay. So you couldn't write a whole book about it because there's not that much to explore, because, you know, that's not going to work. You could potentially maybe write like an essay about maybe like quantum mechanics and like, you know, the probability of atoms being in. I mean, you could in theory. I mean, I'm sure
it's going to be bad. It's gonna
I'm sure someone who's you know, more educated on the finer points of quantum mechanics. Although I did take a course in that in college. But someone who's a specialist on that could probably, you know, write something interesting about it. But it would be like a shorter essay. It wouldn't be like a whole book, because some of that is just kind of impossible. I mean, one thing actually that would be interesting would be the X-Men. And I mentioned the X-Men in my bonus chapter that's up on scienceofdaredevil.com, which is a companion website. Because one interesting thing you could do with the X-Men, of course, again, a lot of their abilities are just like, nope, never going to happen. That's just like, I mean, Daredevil 2, never going to happen, but you can at least explain sort of the nuts and bolts of it all. But one thing that's kind of interesting with the X-Men would be, because I was always kind of wondering, like, okay, so all of these things depend on a single gene called the X gene, and still you get all these different outcomes with all these different characters that have very different powers. Some of them don't even have powers, they just end up like, you know, being blue or something that's not very useful. But how would you get, what kind of gene would the X gene be, and how would you get that kind of expression? And then, of course, I was toying with that idea of the X gene actually being some kind of transcription factor, which is like a sequence that would then affect other genes downstream of it, and that maybe it would have, maybe it would be very susceptible to what's called epigenetic changes to it, like they're like, you know, because there's like this whole other level of chemistry on top of genes that can kind of regulate how they're expressed. I mean, that's something you could kind of play with, you know, and like, okay, so what would that do? And then some of the characters maybe have like, certain, I mean, their mutations are the kinds of traits that would be, what's called an atavism, when you have like a piece of like a let's say a fossilized part of your genome that's maybe was expressed in like a distant ancestor but isn't expressed anymore. It's a kind of trait that like, for instance, some chickens can be born with teeth, which is super freaky. Like, Google it. Like, to anybody who wants to Google that, it's super freaky.
That sounds like nightmare fuel.
It is nightmare fuel. So like, Google that at your own risk. But again, it's like, of course, chickens don't have teeth, but some ancestor did, and it may be like there are certain traits that can be sort of reactivated or expressed in some way that aren't normally expressed. They're dormant, but I mean, you can play around with that stuff. So I suppose that could be something. It wouldn't be a whole book. It would maybe be like a novella length.
Can we make it from Mr. Sinister's point of view?
Yeah.
That's his thing.
So, but I do enjoy using, I've gone to, when I've gone to cons and stuff, I've been to like a couple of, panels, like seminars where people have been talking about how to use science or science fiction and fantasy and superheroes and stuff in science education. And, that kind of thing can be really, really interesting. I went to, when I was at New York Comic Con last year, there was this one guy who was teaching, and he actually did like an example lesson of the kind that he would teach his students. I think he taught like middle school or something, about doing kind of, the calculation of what happens, like when Gwen Stacy fell and like her neck.
No.
Like, so some people in the audience were like, is this okay for your students to hear? And he was like, they've seen worse, which is also true, so like 14-year-olds have not, been exposed to like worse stuff than that. But it was really kind of funny. And I do think that that is one way of just, even a lot of the stuff can't, it's not real life, compatible in that sense, but you can use a lot of examples from comics, and from movies. And even when they get things wrong, to have a discussion about why wouldn't this work, So I think it's a great way for teachers who are into this stuff to like, hey, bring this into the classroom, and, you're going to get your students to pay better attention.
Yeah, I think so for sure. Well, we're almost at an hour. It has been so fascinating talking to you. Thank you so much for this interview.
Sure.
Is there any projects you have in the works? Anything you want to plug? I'll give you the time to do so. We're going to put your website and the companion site and the book and stuff in the show notes, but is there anything else you want to plug?
Yeah, well, not anything super concrete. I am actually semi-planning. I'm worried about, actually mentioning this because, well, actually, maybe I will, because then I'll have to do it. I've been thinking of actually doing a like 6 to 7 episode podcast series on the radar sense, expanding on some of the stuff in the book. And that's Cat Murdock right there. So I've been kind of starting to script that. Who knows when that's going to be? I mean, it could be months from now, but I suppose,
please let us know. We're happy to boost it and everything. We everything Daredevil, really everything comic book related. We have people that do fan films on stuff like that. So yeah, we totally love it.
Yeah, I just felt like I wasn't done with the subject, and especially the radar sense. It's just it's been so many different things and nothing at all at the same time. It's just very, like, nobody knows. That's the kind of thing you think when you first pick up the book, that clearly people have, like, the writers have a sense of what the radar sense is. And then, like, you read more and more, and it's like, yeah, but there's not just, none of it actually, there's not one way to fit it all together, and in a coherent way that accounts for everything he's ever done or not done, so it is kind of fascinating, and it's interesting from also the origins of it. I mean, one thing that I realized just briefly before I started writing the book, I was reading a book by a blind writer. And the book had actually just come out. It had only been out for a few months, so I was just lucky I read it. And she was referencing a quote from a blind author who had written a book that came out in 1958 called The Sound of the Walls. And he has one description in there of what it feels like to kind of sense your surroundings without seeing them. That when I read that section, I was like, holy shit. Stan Lee or someone at Marvel must have read this. It was just so, I will never forget the moment I read that. And I'm like, whoa, is this where they got the inspiration to, cause he even says it's like radar, and of course radar had World War II was when radar became like a big, the new technology.
Did they really know the difference between sonar and radar?
Sorry?
Did they know the difference between sonar and radar?
No. Most writers don't. Most writers don't, honestly. And like I point out in the book, it's like within like a single issue, it could be like 3 different things. So whenever I have people kind of, sort of, if I put something out and someone's like, well, actually the Raiders, I'm like, no. Come back to me after you've read all this like 5 times, specifically like writing down every single little thing about the Raiders, and then you can come back to me. And you'll notice it's like, it's all over the place, but it's fascinaning. So.
Well, you sound super passionate, so we hope you do that podcast. We really do.
Yeah. There's so much more to say.
Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Did my Audible account's kind of bad, but did it ever actually get put on Audible for the audiobook? I like audiobooks, and I think I'm going to download it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I should mention that too, because, yes, it's on Audible. It's on, pretty much all the audio, websites too. Yeah. I recorded an audiobook. I did that over the course of one weekend. The guy who recorded it, who had the studio where I recorded it, said that I held the record for most consecutive hours of recording. It was that insane. Like I had to drive 5 hours to get to a place. He had like an old house he had rebuilt into an old house from the late 18th century, I should add. He had rebuilt into like a sound studio. It was crazy. But it was like the cheapest place I could find. So I did like, I think 18 hours of recording, and then I cut that down to like, it's 10 hours and 15 minutes, I think. So, so I did my own recording. So if you hate the sound of my voice, don't, you may want to skip it, but yeah, that was kind of crazy. It is out, it's available as an audiobook for people who prefer that. Yeah.
Oh, and I did get a message that somebody says you better do 50 plus ways in which Born Again reminds you that Matt.
Yeah.
For real. We are all looking forward to that, actually.
So. Yeah. And I hope there will be more than 50. I really hope so. That's always been kind of a dream of mine that, someone associated with that show has actually read my book, because it would be beneficial to them to read it, but of course I don't think they could ever, actually say one way or the other if they did, but because if you think this character is confusing, there's a way to unconfuse yourself. And I hope I've been able to do that.
I think you did a great job.
Well, thank you.
If you do another book project, please let us know. I'd be down to read it.
Yeah.
So have a good night. I'll let you get back to your life.
Oh, yeah. You too. Bye.
Bye.